Laura, you can lead us in the pledge tonight. Are we on?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America,
United States of
to the
America,
republic
which
which
stands
and
stands
to the
one
republic
nation,
for which it
under
stands
God,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty
with
and
liberty
justice
and justice for all.
Nothing sounds better than an unsyncopated sense of the pledge. Okay, very good, very good. Good evening and welcome to this special meeting, the Philipstown Planning Board, January 28th, Thursday, 7:30 p.m. The purpose of this meeting is a narrow purpose. The purpose of tonight is to have a discussion among the board in a public setting to discuss our observations and emerging questions that arose from our walk of the Garrison Golf Course, which was a substantial crowd, socially distanced with masks in a frigid temperature. But the volume of people that came out, I think, demonstrates people's interest, passion, and the awareness of this project. And so the purpose is for the board to talk about their viewpoints. This is the structure we'll have. We'll go with the board members in alphabetical order by their first name. I'll take the option to go last. After, excuse me, after all board members have spoken. I'll ask Ron and Steve if they want to add any additional commentary at that point. And then after that, we'll turn it over to the applicant to share some comments if they'd like. This is an early conversation after a site visit. We are not done. This is not an attempt of the applicant to answer all our questions. It's an attempt for this board to get out some of their viewpoints and questions they'll look for answers over the coming months. To that point, we're going to try, as I've said for many months now, this is it's month 9 of COVID. We're going to try and stay to a 2-hour time limit because this gets exhausting on Zoom. We won't cut off dialogue if it's going on, but we're going to try and stick to 2 hours. This is, again, not the final bite at the apple. Sorry, last point. This is not a public hearing, meaning this is not open for public commentary. We will have a public hearing during the process as we go through. However, members of the public are encouraged, if you'd like, to submit questions via the chat. Cheryl Rocket, our soon-to-be now new planning board secretary, will monitor that chat while outgoing and deeply appreciated outgoing Secretary Kelly McIntyre runs the meeting. So that's the plan. Any questions among the board members? Okay. I think we should go right to, actually, I guess, Kelly, you're going to let the members of the applicant.
There's like 68 people out there.
Sorry, Bob?
There's like 70 people on this call.
Well, I think that is indicative of my point about the walk on Sunday. So, Dennis, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Neil. After reviewing the documents, right now I had a couple of questions. This pertains to part 1 of the full environmental assessment form. Item D.2C, that's page 5 on 13. It's water usage, referencing water usage at an anticipated 15,661 gallons per day. I'm curious on what the present usage is. I know it's basically shut down now, but what would be the anticipated usage be under normal conditions as the golf course with the restaurant and the other items associated with the daily usage? That same question really goes to item D2.D on liquid waste. So I'm looking to see what the usage is now, what the liquid waste is, and proposed on that. I'm not expecting an answer right now, obviously. I do have one concern as it stands from our walkthrough with the relocation of the tent theater. When we were up on that ridge, it wasn't very windy, but I'm concerned with, and my concern is, has it been taken into consideration the new location and the wind effect, unbuffered wind on that structure. And the same thing for the new structure that would be designed. That's it right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, Dennis, you're more than welcome to share observations as well of the any board member as we go through this conversation. Let's go to, let's see, I guess we're now to Heidi. I guess you're next.
Okay. So my questions have to do with, and I know other people, I'm assuming other people are going to follow up on the traffic light item that came up at the site visit. I mean, I'm interested in all the traffic issues, including the possibility that we could get a traffic light at the intersection with Route 9 and Snake Hill Road to kind of control traffic there. I know there's traffic issues on Snake Hill itself at the entrance on Snake Hill. But I think others are going to cover those topics who perhaps have a little bit more background on those issues than I do at this point. I would just like to ask some questions about which trees are coming down on the property. I was really struck at the site visit that there's some old and very majestic trees, especially, and I'm particularly wondering how the widening of the road coming in at Snake Hill Road, the expansion of the road from 10 feet to 20 feet to make it a 2-lane road is going to affect the those lovely trees that are currently along that road, whether you have plans to bring those down, and even if there's not currently plans to take them down, whether that could sometimes be collateral damage on a building project, and what the likelihood of that is, and kind of just in general, what is the plan in terms of taking down some of the trees that are currently on the property, if there's been any sketching out of that, of those plans. We did see kind of the way the road is going to be restructured through the property, but I wasn't sure exactly how that's going to affect the clusters of trees that are there. And also what's going to happen with the road going through that one, the road coming off of Route 9 that's going to go through the little woodland section, how wide that road's going to be, whether that's going to impact that little natural area that's, not too far from Route 9, just after, as you come in off on the new road, just after the area where the cottages are going to be, and continue toward the tent section of the property. What will happen to the trees in that area and the rest of that property, of that area of the property. And then, and I second Dennis's question about the water use. There were a lot of questions at the site visit about how impacts on the aquifer under the property, whether that's been studied. I'm curious also what the water quality is now on the property, with whether there's been pesticides used it's my understanding that often golf courses, you have to maintain the surfaces. There has to be, some either fertilizer or pesticides used, and whether or not that's been studied, whether there's already some contamination of the water there. And if that's going to be undertaken to make sure that whatever's already there that's might have, caused some damage already is going to be cleaned up if there have been such impacts. And that would include, the wetlands on the property, which I'm sure that the Conservation Board will look out for. But I just want to put in a word that, we should definitely try during this process of considering new construction on the property to clean up whatever's been left behind by the old use, which obviously is going to continue to some degree in the future, but whether there could be, some cleanup and maybe some improvements, if to the extent that it hasn't been entirely, consistent with the best environmental quality. I really laud the plans for the native plant garden. I hope that can, I know that the plan is to construct in stages, but I hope that that could be an early part of the project, and so that there's, almost, some immediate environmental pluses to this project from the get-go, with respect to the native plant garden. So I think I'll just, I think others are going to cover traffic, as I said, and some other of my interests, but I'll just,
Heidi,
not go on and on.
Heidi, feel free. I mean, we're trying to get all out there. If you've got a view, go ahead and please share it. You don't have to, of course, but if you'd like to, please do.
Well, I mean, I am concerned about the, I know the cottages are supposedly small. They're not so very small. Like, I lived most of my life in a cottage smaller than that in the city. It's always cracks me up to hear that it's a tiny house if it's, 800 square feet. But anyway, we have comments in the memo that Ron's compiled about how much of the year those cottages would be occupied. Of course, it's fabulous that there would be artists on the site and artists in the community. That's superb. That's to be welcomed. I guess just making sure that that we consider all the environmental impacts of that, as opposed to a golf course where there presumably were not a lot of residents on the property, is really important. And Dennis has touched on that with the water use and the septic use. And obviously traffic is another major issue, because there's obviously will be a lot more car traffic on the property. And so as a result, we really need a lot more trees. We need more trees to absorb the carbon. I wonder if anyone's done an analysis of the increase of carbon that will result from the new site uses, particularly the traffic, and whether or not there's a way of, compensating for that carbon by either some soil practices or tree planting that would ensure that the site could be carbon neutral in the end result. And making sure also that the construction doesn't happen during a season when the peeper frogs are going to be particularly active in the wetlands. I've noticed that there isn't necessarily always consciousness about that around here. And obviously, I think we should avoid construction in this area between the season of mid-March through the end of April, or whatever time the peeper frogs are most active here, which is one of the most phenomenal aspects of living here, and such a spectacular aspect of this section of the Hudson Valley, that we have such a vibrant peeper frog population and wetland population with salamanders, and make sure that the road crossing issues are considered with respect to Snake Hill Road. Perhaps signs could be put up to ensure that to whatever extent the amphibians are crossing Snake Hill Road or Route 9 at that area, that the cars would stop, that if there's performances during those time periods, that people watch out for the amphibians crossing the roads and take those considerations into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. I think we're up to Kim. You're next.
Okay. I'm not really sure how to start here because I have a lot, but
The floor is yours and the time is ample. So Kim,
all right.
start.
So
Begin at the beginning, as they say.
All right. So are we talking about the sidewalk, things we saw on the sidewalk specifically first, or can I talk about the EAF or?
Kim, the floor is yours.
All right.
We're here to talk about only one project. God bless. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the EAF first, just because some of the things that have to do with the EAF may be things we talk about related to the sidewalk. So on the EAF in section D1F, which is on page 4 of 13, the question is, does the project include new residential uses? And it says that only 2 one-family units that are new will be constructed at completion. And I just want to know why it says that when we have, 15 or so cottages, right? I guess I want to know what the definition is of new residential uses. The second thing is, In section G, it says total number of structures plus or minus 31 that are new for this project. I'd like to have it outlined, exactly what those 31 new structures are. I'd like actually kind of like a table. It would be nice because it's hunting through all these different pages and looking at all the documents. It'd be really useful to have a table that says, this is what the water usage is going to be. And this is what the water usage was in the PDD, and what it is now. And, this is what the number of residential structures are. And this is, all of that. So if we could just have numbers in a table so we could compare them easily, that would be helpful. Number 3 is D2C. Water is going to be produced through wells. I'd like to know how many wells and where they're going to be specifically. D2E, it says it's all going to be septic systems. I'd like to know why there is, whether or not there's been a consideration for a new some sort of sewage treatment plant similar to what they're proposing at Hudson Highlands Reserve. And if there won't be, then why it's preferable to have septic systems as opposed to a, some sort of small sewage treatment plant. D2P says there are going to be 471 parking spaces, of which 173 are existing. I'd just like to know where those are going to be and have, sort of numbers on a plot that says, 173 are near the existing building, 75 are near this other building. D2P, it says the existing buildings use heating oil, and it talks about how much heating oil they used in 2017. I'd like to know how the new structures are going to be heated or cooled, and what the expectation is for energy usage for those. So for example, the cottages, presumably are either going to be electric, or they're not, or they're going to use heating oil, or they're going to use propane. But all we have is numbers that relate to the existing building's use of heating oil. E2C in the same document lists the various buildings that are either qualified to be on the National Register or are part of Shippo. And one of the buildings that's referenced is called Brookmead. I'd like to know what that building is. Then as far as the EAF Part 2 goes, on page 3, Part 5, it mentions an impact on flooding. It says it may, where it says may result in, this is B, may result in development in the 100-year floodplain. The box is marked no, but earlier in the document, there was a box that said yes for property being within the 100-year floodplain. So I'd like to know where the 100-year floodplain is and why there won't be any development within that 100-year floodplain. Then on page 8 of 10, number 13A, it says its impact on transportation. It says there won't be any impact on transportation, but at the same time, it says that there's a question that says the projected traffic increase may exceed capacity of existing road network, yes or no? I'd like John Canning to answer what the threshold is for the capacity of the existing road network. Because it seems to me that based on other projects we've looked at, that number is infinity. 14D, impact on energy. It says that it's not going to exceed some threshold, which is like 2.0 megawatts or something like that. I'd like to, and it mentions that the existing project was under 100,000 square feet. I'd like to know what the total square footage for the entire site, for every building on this site, will be at the completion of this project. So Appendix C, which is the secret comparison, on page 2 of 27, it says the on-site water storage, that there's going to be on-site water storage, and that there's going to be, this was for the, I'm sorry, for the 2005 project, 36,672 gallons a day would be used, and that there was also on-site water storage. But the side of the page that references the current project doesn't say anything about water. And also on page 10 of 27, it said that the expectation was for 2005 that there would be 12,672 gallons of sanitary waste produced. And in the current document, it's almost 3 times that much. So I want to know what these numbers are, and I want some comparisons, again, a table. On page 6 of 27, they estimated that there would be 80 banquets a year for the PDD as of 2005. I'd like to know how many banquets there were in 2019 and 2018, just for comparison. So we have an idea of how many banquets there might be. That's weddings. And that kind of. Page 19 of 27, it mentions having an existing spa, and this is in the 2005 PDD, having a spa and business offices in the main building. I'd like to know if the spa will continue to exist and serve clients, and if the business offices will remain, and how that's going to account for employees. Because one of the things we've talked about is how many people are going to be on the site at any given time. So there are restaurant employees, there are Shakespeare employees, there are golf course employees, there are visitors to the site. And I want to make sure that the spa operations and the business offices and every other auxiliary activity is that we know how many people are expected to be on the site. And then on page 25, it talks about tax revenue to the county and the town. And it says that as a result of the new 2021 application or 2020 application, they expect expanded restaurant operation. And I'm wondering what that means. If that means that they're expecting, because Shakespeare is on site, there will be more people going to the restaurant, or if there's some other thing that is expected to expand the restaurant operation. So that's my discussion of the EAF. As far as the sidewalk goes, I want to know more about the cottages. You know, it seems like this seems like a sort of a summer camp plan from the 1920s to the 1950s. They're small. I think they're below the 750 square foot town requirement for a dwelling. And it just seems to me that it might be a light footprint if it's one such building on a regular sized lot. But what we have here is a cluster of buildings with a lot of people living in them, and that isn't really a light footprint. Because it's gonna be summer use to start with, there's gonna be a lot of air conditioning. And it just seems like if you really wanna have a light footprint and be environmentally sensible, then you might really wanna make, you know, like a 4 apartment building or a small hotel building there, or something that is just going to be more energy efficient because it has scale. I also think, you know, like a tiny house is fine if that's what you want, but it's not necessarily very comfortable or very pleasant for everybody, especially if you're in there with children. So there are a bunch of questions in the list that we gave for Ron. Like, I'd like to know how the cottages differ from being a mobile home park, for example, which can only exist in a mobile home overlay district. What's going to prevent them from becoming year-round housing? And actually, why wouldn't you want to just plan for year-round housing if you could use it as hotel space, or if your black box theater is going to have performers that might want to be on site while that's happening? So it's not really clear as far as the Garrison's existing hotel plan, where those things are and how many guests there are going to be. So I guess what I'm just chiefly interested in is, you know, numbers of people that are going to be on site at various times of the day all year round, you know, because to me, that's the biggest impact, you know, is the septic and the cars and, you know, just the overall traffic. I'm just trying to see from Ron's list what else is in here that other people haven't already mentioned. You know, I could bring each of these things up, but you know.
Kim, I think this matters also for you. I think whether it's been said before or not, if you feel it strongly or you feel like it struck you, I think it's important to use this opportunity to talk it out.
Okay, because I'm assuming what's going to happen is we're going to say all these things. We're going to give a copy of these questions to the applicant, and then we're going to talk about them again, right?
And again,
And again. So, you know, do you want me to read the things that are on this list?
I want you to say whatever you want to say. That's what this opportunity is. You do whatever you want.
Perfect. Okay. So explain the existing water demands for the existing development on the property, outline the water supply, estimate the daily water demands for the proposed uses. Let's make sure that we think the sanitary system is adequate and, you know, sensible, and not, the runs aren't too long and there isn't too much piping from too many buildings going all over the place. I'd like to know what top capacity is for everything operating all at once. I'd like to see I'd like to see a dedicated turning lane going north, like we have at Glassbury Court. I'd like to see a lane developed going south, so that people who are turning into the site can actually pull into it seems to me there's room there, you know, to pull into their own lane to be turning, so that the traffic, because what you have coming up before that is a 2-lane road that goes where one of the lanes goes away because it's a hill and it's, you know, to accommodate trucks coming up the hill. And so then you're going to have confusion with people, that lane going away and then people trying to pull off the road. So I just think that that needs to be really considered. And I think the entrance needs to be widened. And I think there should be a mountable curb in between each lane going into the property, as we have at Philipstown Square, so that people are not confused when they come in or out of the site. I'm not sure what I think about Snake Hill Road. It would be good if there were a one-way system, if possible. You know, I think that traffic's obviously going to have to be examined, and I agree that it would be good to have a light at Snake Hill and Route 9, and I think probably the community would be in favor of that. It seems like whenever we talk about that with people in the community, so many people know about accidents that have happened there that, you know, I don't know how you push for that. You know, I know Nancy Montgomery our legislator has looked into that and talked to the DOT, and, you know, so whatever pressure we can put on the DOT to allow that to happen, you know, I am all in favor. So a lot of people on the sidewalk talked about concerns that this would become a public park. And I think it says within the application that there is no intention to have a public park. But I think that should be clarified when in the statements that the applicant makes, they talk about public access and being available to the public. I think that should be really, really clarified as to how that's going to be managed and what that actually will be, because it seemed like the residents were quite concerned about that. And I guess that's probably about it for me for now. Everybody's probably tired of hearing from me at the moment. So, and I will, if things come up later, I will bring them up.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Laura, you're next.
Okay, I'm going to follow the same as Kim's format. I'm going to go through the EAF form. So on D1F, I have the same comment as Kim. It lists 1-family homes as 2. Just want to understand where the cottages fall into that category. D2 in project operations, just a question. I think at the walkthrough, I asked whether or not the new landscape design was, you know, assuming that the removal of the existing golf topographic was going to be removed, or the golf course was going to be removed in order for them to then start designing or lay in whatever they were going to design. And that was the case. So is that not considered as major excavation? That's just a question. In D2B, Is there not a transient wetlands at Route 9 where the proposed new driveway is coming in from Route 9? Sorry, D2B, I guess 4, where it says, will it be proposed action cause and result of destruction or removal of aquatic vegetation? They're talking about the culvert. Do they not have to submit a construction logistics plan in order for us to understand? So will the design of that Snake Hill Road culvert area need to be proposed so that we can then understand what the impact will be, and then therefore determine whether or not there's going to be any obstruction or impact to that vegetation? Then the next question below that, will the proposed action use and create a new demand for water? Yes, similar question. How many wells? Is it just one? How many? For clarification. Same question with regard to Kim on wastewater and the sewage treatment versus a series of septic tanks or septic wells. And then the other question that I had was in section, sorry. D2, so it's page 8 of 13, D2, I guess L or M, where it says, will the proposed action produce noise and will exceed existing ambient noise levels during construction, operation, or both? You know, depending on whether they need to blast through rock or anything of that nature of what they're building. Again, I think that's going to be contingent on a construction logistics plan after they survey the land on their proposed design. And then a few questions below that. Says, does proposed action have the potential to produce odors for more than 1 hour per day? I assume that's during construction and not during operation once new building has been built. If that's the case, if it's during construction, that's fine. I'm sure there's not. But if it is after the new building, the question is whether or not they will have a scene shop and or a prop shop. And if they're doing any sort of spray booth, that they provide the correct air filter ventilation. That's just a question to the owner or to the client. Let's see. As I go through, then I get to part 2 of the EAF form. In item number 1 on impact of land, item D, the proposed action may involve the excavation and removal of more than 1,000 tons of natural material. It says smaller impact. Is that correct? If they're actually cutting back that full golf topographic in order for them to lay all new material for their new landscape design, they need to quantify that. And then page 6 of 10, impact on aesthetic resources. It says item A, proposed action may be visible from any officially designated federal, state, or local scenic or aesthetic resource. It says moderate to large. I assume that that is them proposing to our conservation board, if that's the case, just to confirm that. I wanted to know, when does Shippo kick in? Because it does say that it's a moderate to large impact under item 10 for the historic and archaeological resources. What is going to get submitted to Shippo? Impact on transportation, which is item 13, letter A. It says projected traffic increase may exceed capacity of existing road network. It says no or small impacts may occur. Is that true based upon the increase of frequency and the increase of use of that space? Impact on energy, that's item 14, letter D. Purpose action may involve heating and or cooling more than 100,000 square feet of building area when completed. Agreed. What is the total square foot of the completion of the project so that we have a better understanding? Item 15, impact on noise, odor, and light. Again, the proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by local regulations, smaller impact. Great. Are they going to submit a study to show that? And then item B, proposed action may result in blasting within 1,500 feet of any residence, hospital, school, licensed or daycare or nursing home. Moderate to large, they should try to identify where those locations are if that's the case. And that's it on the EAF form for me. So just a couple of things on the walkthrough. When we reviewed the staking of the indoor theater location, there's some concerns because the stakes actually are extremely close to existing large trees. So they're well within the root zone and the root ball. So the question is, how are they going to actually maintain the needed dimension and try to retain those trees? Or are they proposing that those trees be removed? I'm still confused regarding the PDD because I understand that there is a hotel that's been approved for the PDD and that there was constant reference to the existing approved septic system that was already installed as part of the PDD and that we were going to be using that. But the question is that if the hotel is going to still be built and we're going to include all these additional houses and cottages and we're going to use the existing approved development, then is the septic sized correctly? Because aren't we increasing the occupants and increasing the use of that septic system? The impact to energy, the question actually is to Hudson Valley Shakes and whether or not we're considering different types of energy sources. Are they actually investigating the potential use of solar or different types of energy use as opposed to relying on our current existing systems? I agree with Dennis with regard to noise impact and the fact of studies potentially need to be done due to how noise travels through wind and sound depending on the elevation and the way that sound reverberates, and whether or not the Hudson Valley Shakespeare or the project team will be doing that. I feel that Snake Hill is a challenge, but I think we all agree to that. The question is whether or not we can recommend that the Hudson Valley Shakespeare accelerates the design of Snake Hill so that we have a better understanding of what could potentially be. And so therefore we can have a better understanding of what the impact is so that we can make a much more educated decision on that. And then again, I have these constant questions regarding like what has been approved in the PDD, what's actually going to be built to the original PDD, and then what portion of that PDD is then being applied to Hudson Valley Shakespeare. And that's it for me.
All right, Laura, thank you. It's very helpful. Neil, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Neil. I tell you, boy, there's some good thought going into this. I'm going to try to not repeat. I think if they gave out a black belt in EAF analysis, Kim and Laura would be like, yeah, I mean, it's this incredible analysis going on there. It's great. I'm gonna switch to the screen share. My questions aren't nearly as deep. I rely on visual aids, so bear with me. So Dennis, the first thing, Dennis, I think that's interesting. I think I had the same thought. Are we good on the screen share? Yes. So I'm getting, now my audio is not great now. Yeah, Dennis, when we were up there, this is the site of the tent. When we were up there, the wind was blowing like crazy. That was a question of mine. How are they going to anchor it? Is that really where you want to put a tent? let's go down here. I have the same concerns and questions about the turn. This is the, this is the blind turn. I mean, I think the applicant is going to have to think about moving this, maybe coming over something more like this. You have to redo the bridge anyway. I think that might have to move over. Let's see, where else can I go with this? Oh yeah, this is, I like this shot because, we talk about the traffic light. Let's scoot down here. This is going to be an interesting intersection for the applicant to explain how all this traffic's going to get in and out. And I like this. I like the next one down. Where is it? Because there's an undulation to this where it comes down. It sort of levels out, and then it goes down again. So your sight lines here, they're not great, and your braking time here is not great. And I think we need to look at that a little bit. Let's see, what else do I have? I want another one. Here we go. Yeah. And the density around here, I don't know if you can kind of get your bearings. We've got the existing facility here. And then it just, and I agree with with some of the comments about 15 separate buildings in here, when it would seem to be much more efficient to be building dorms or something in this envelope. 15 separate buildings is a lot of infrastructure. It's a lot of I don't know, it's just again, I think it's a bigger footprint than it needs to be. Let's see. Yeah, I've got my notes here. There's some good, running. What's this going to look like when we're running at max capacity? And I think I brought this up to the app. Maybe it might have been even at a pre-app meeting or something. I forget. But we can't lose sight of all the different functions. And I think the applicant is prone to say, well, they're not all going to happen at the same time, which for me isn't how I have to look at it. I have to look at it. You've got a full golf course, you've got a full restaurant, you've got a full 20-room hotel, you've got full. I mean, I look at this as I had a note here. Let's call it the Saturday night impact. That's what I want to analyze. What's this thing Saturday night in August when everything's, going? That's sort of the level that I want to, that's what I want. I want those numbers. And there's been some great comments about shaking out the numbers for septic and traffic and emergency access. That's sort of what I want to see. On the site walk, we sort of went through here, and we know it's going to kind of do something like that. Heidi, I think these are the trees that you were concerned with. Absolutely. Emergency access, plowing. I mean, there's sort of a lot to absorb here. And I'm looking at my notes. And one that nobody's, I don't think anybody's brought this up yet, but I'm interested in so we have the 15 units. Glenn's going to kill me for this because he's like, oh, that's not the footprint. Let's just say that's the footprint. So we have the 15 buildings in there. I'm interested in what is the relationship between the organization and the people occupying those spaces. So in New York State, you're either under a lease or you're under a license. So when people come to live there and they say, well, it's going to be an artist retreat or it's going to be short-term housing. Well, New York State doesn't always look at it that way. You at some time, if you have a license to stay somewhere, it can mature into a lease. And what if we get somebody that maybe isn't ready to move out or isn't ready to move on? And it's something we have to think about. There was a good question at the site walk about, well, are there going to be any more kids, any more children? Is this going to become a burden on the school system? Well, I mean, it's easy to say no, but if you have 2 or 3 tenants who decide that they really like it here, I'd like to know more about that relationship. Like what are what are the terms under which these artists are in residence? And because you do run into, landlord tenant, it can get sticky. And so that was kind of it for me. But and I talked, I've been talking to a couple of people about this, and I think it's important that we sort of keep in sight. Nat Prentice does, and his crew does such a good, they're so diligent about the comprehensive plan. And I think when I do the same thing. I look at something like this and I go, oh, septic, water, boom, 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 boom. I think maybe it's worth a minute to think about Nat and all their good work and the comprehensive plan, which is this well thought out document. It was circulating a couple weeks ago. But when I read that, it essentially says, let's be careful about building anything that's just too big or too ugly or just too much. And I think we've seen other applicants run into that, where maybe we can't put our finger on it, but it's just too much. And that I think is what the comprehensive plan is sort of there for. It's like a catch-all. I'm not sure about this. Let's stop and take a look. So I think as we go through this, let's not lose sight of that. Let's not lose sight of Nat and all their good work and trying to come up with a broader look at this. So anyway, but thank you for your time.
Very thoughtful, Neil. Thank you. Peter?
Mute. A lot of material's been covered and a lot of the questions I had. I don't particularly at this time want to address the questions I have regarding what we didn't visit on the site walk, which related to the location of the golf holes. There seems to still be one on the parcel that is bounded by Philipsbrook on the north and Snake Hill on the west. And where I don't see anywhere on the current concept plan where the pro shop and where the golf cart shed probably will wind up. But those will be for our second walk, I guess. I do have one concern about the concept plan scale. The 40-room hotel doesn't look to be the size of a 40-room hotel to me. Perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe that's really what the scale looks like, and the rooms are going to be quite modest in size. But I wanted that to be really in scale for we have a sense of like how much space it's going to be taking up. Let's see, septic is taken care of. Aquifer. I wasn't sure, and I'd like to have clarified what the challenge parcel represents. I mean, what exactly does challenge mean? Is it not part of this plan at the moment? Is it something that's contingent upon some other, something else that needs to be done? So I guess it's just the word challenge that gave me a little spooking there. We've done the EAF very nicely. I was very much concerned about how much say the planning board has to the traffic light, whether it's completely a DOT decision or something that we can weigh in on in a little bit more vibrant way to get them to think about that. I don't think anything but a traffic light was really going to be an option at Route 9. And I'm also concerned about the four corners of Travis Corners, Snake Hill, and Route 9, and the potential for development on those corners. I know we have Rodak on the northeast. We've got the golf course on the northwest. We've got the architecture building, but a large kind of open space on the southwest, and the southeast has a house, but also a very large open and empty plot there. And I'm concerned about the nature of development and what type of zoning we have. I didn't have access to a zoning map, so I was concerned about that. And also, I know this is perhaps a preliminary document from Kimley and Horn, and they may not be the best people to turn to relative to the actual application itself, but in particular, the private residence information that they give. Back in 2005, two parcels were, 2 units were set aside, and I believe 2 units were built on at the big curve by the, whatever it is, the 8th hole. We have the large whatever it is, log cabin up on the hill by the hole, and then the other house it's built, down by the road. It also says existing development, okay, so 205 PDD approval, 2 units, existing development, 2 units, current proposal, 2 units, and it says no change. Either that doesn't count the house that Chris Davis has set, the parcel that Chris has set aside for himself, or we're looking at yet another unit which we don't know anything about. Now that might not be correct in terms of the application, but I just want to make sure that what we're really looking at is 1 residential unit. I'm not talking about the artist residence at the far north end of the property, but the far south end of the property, that there isn't, or there aren't plans for the potential expansion of more residential units there, which would crowd that area considerably. So I was worried a little bit about that, wanted to know more about that. And I believe that all of my other concerns were already addressed, so I'm not going to beat them to death. That's it for me.
All right, thank you, Peter. So I'm probably going to repeat some things, but two introductory comments. One, I want to thank my fellow board members. You're effectively volunteers with a tiny stipend, and so your diligence matters, and thank you for that. It's very cogent, very thoughtful, very deep assessments. Secondly, I do want to thank Davis and Glenn for your leadership on our walk last week. I thought it was safe. I thought we were socially distant, and I think we got a lot out of it. And it was sad. It was the first time I'd seen that many people in 10 months, but it was nice to see everyone. I wish it was more of a pure social event than it was a legal or business event, but it was good to see people anyway. So I'm probably going to repeat some remarks, but I want you to be clear about what I'm thinking. I think Neil, as an introductory comment, I will say I'll run through my individual pieces, but your point about too big or too much struck me because I think one of the things I'm going to look to Ron and Steve on is the sum total of all these activities. Your Neil, your Saturday night test comes to mind because there are many uses occurring simultaneously. I think about other properties we've looked at, other larger developments that have not nearly as many individual components, and with far greater acreage. And I just want to understand how that fits within this one because there are so many pieces. There's so many pieces. I'll walk through some of my pieces that I come to mind. The first is is on entry, especially relative to Snake Hill Road. I'm gonna get my headphones because the Metro North train is coming to the Garrison station. It's getting a little loud in here. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Yes. Yes. No? Oh, no. Hello? Can you hear me now? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So let me just go through my list of items. Thank you. So
I
the
want to
first,
turn your volume up.
Yeah, turn your volume up.
okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you guys. Sorry about that. The train is in the station. Sorry. So the first is around Snake Hill Road. This is a local road with a sharp curve. And if we're going to use as part of your plan for entry and exit, I think we have to be really mindful about what is a safe usage of that. Whether there should be limits on the direction turning in. or not turning in from a different direction, or having only one directional usage, or frankly limiting it to certain events. The notion of 500 cars coming out one night on a Saturday night when the restaurant, a wedding, hotel guests, and a wonderful event that's on the lawn, and an event that occurs in the tent with several hundred cars pouring into a local road on Snake Hill seems to me an exceedingly unsafe activity, and one I don't know how we're going to organize. And hope in the state DOT, I think, is not necessarily a plan. Hope is, as President Obama would say, hope is not a strategy. Secondly, and I've hit that point on Snake Hill Road. The second is traffic within the property. I don't think we've talked about the actual flow of traffic within the property. And again, I can imagine you've got several hundred people at the same time moving about, pedestrians mixed in with cars, buses flying in for the wedding parties. There is an enormous amount of traffic that can occur, and understanding that flow of traffic matters. My third point is on the number of buildings. I see here on the map, it states that you're going to have 37 rooms in the artists' accommodations in the northern corner. Another 20, I guess these are rooms in the new additional hotel, plus the existing, what says 8 rooms in the, or maybe it's 8 guests in the existing B&B. I'd like to understand that volume of traffic, and not traffic, excuse me, that volume of dwellings and how that fits into the usage parameters we have for this size property. That's a large number. And I think tied to that, I had a fourth point, which is on hotel guests. I'm trying to understand the usage we have. Clearly, whether, and I think Neil Tolman brought this point up in some sense, whether you call them artist residences, whether you call them temporary visiting, whatever it is, it's either a dwelling or it's a hoteling. If they're there temporarily, is it a hotel or is it a dwelling? But either way, we have usage guidelines in our zoning that clarifies what we can have and what is required. And I think we have to understand whether 15 dwellings are available and appropriate for this property, whether having 37 plus 20, 57 additional rooms is appropriate under our zoning, and what are the requirements for actually having that level of people, whether it's tied to the number of parking spaces, whether it's tied to the physical space needed. But that is a lot of human beings staying at night 24 hours a day on the property. And I think understanding that technically about that zoning is very important. We've heard 2 points about noise and light pollution. This is an area of heavy residential area, or meaning it is quite a residential area, and there'll be an enormous amount of volume and light broadcast from weddings, hotel guests, residents, a park, an indoor theater, an outdoor theater, and a golf course. I think we have to be mindful about that, what that volume is that occurs. We did hear at length about water. I think that's an interesting commentary. I see Ms. Coleman has put several paragraphs together about that topic on the chat, which is important. I'd like to understand the owned buildings. I believe that tied to the Garrison, I don't know if they're private ownership of Chris Davis or they're tied to the Garrison Golf Club ownership, but some of those buildings that line Route 9 on the west side of Route 9, aka Bill's Deli and others, I want to understand how that is part of the count of the total dwellings that are going to be and are allowed on the property. I'd like to talk about the golf entrance. We haven't spent any time talking. We certainly didn't get a chance to visit the golf side of the house. Clearly there'll be, I'm sure, at least one bathroom over there in that facility. People drive 50 to 70 miles an hour on that straightaway, and I know who you are. I know who you are out there. I've seen your cars, and no, I've never done that before. No, of course I have. Once in a while, who hasn't done that? That's a fun straightaway, isn't it? But we're going to have people going 50 to 70 miles an hour. Now we're going to have traffic for admittedly a 9-hole course. How are we thinking about that traffic? Because again, that is generally a local road and there's virtually no one on that. The only person generally is a couple of golf carts crossing away. I think we have to be mindful of that traffic. And then my second last point is We did not hear, I think there were different estimates that were wildly different about the square footage of this dwelling for Mr. Davis that would go on the western side. I heard at one point someone said it was 2,000 square feet, and the stakes were, I think the stakes were like 100 by 100 feet. So somewhere between that size and 2,000 square feet is the truth. So I'd like to understand a little bit more of that dwelling. And then lastly, I know a number of those who walked on the course with us are residents of Philipsbrook Road, which is obviously what divides the first and the second hole, and is below where these residences would be and the additional activities that are going on at the main buildings. I'd like to understand if there's any access plan to Philipsbrook Road. So those are, wow, Ron, a lot of questions we've had. And I thank you for putting your memo together. We're going to hopefully augment your memo with anything that was added today by the board or by the public. I wonder if, Ron, you have any questions you want to add or any comments you want to give at this point, and then Steve, and then we can open up to the applicant for the next, hour or so if they'd like to respond to certain things or comment on anything. So Ron first.
I don't have specific questions of the applicant. Tried to outline to the board the initial step in the process is really to move the seeker process along. You've declared your intent to become lead agency. All other involved agencies have been notified, but their mandatory 30-day comment period will not expire until, I think, early next week. So at the February meeting, you can actually become or formally designate yourself to be the lead agency. And at that point, you'll start looking at these things in earnest with the applicant. So that's a process that's on the horizon for the board.
And Ron, I wonder if you want to give, since we have a large number of members of the public, I wonder if it'd be valuable, without putting you too much on the spot, to just share a general sense of how this process will unfold over the next several meetings.
Sure. As I said, the planning board has initially classified the project as a type 1 action pursuant to seeker. It's right out of their regulations, given the size of the project. It mandates a coordinated environmental review with all other agencies. That process has begun. That permits all other agencies to offer comments to the board or objections to your becoming lead agency. It's also an opportunity for them to raise issues that they believe should be studied by the lead agency and part of your review of the environmental impacts. So as I said, that's the initial project process to get started. The applicant, I'm certain, will attempt to provide further detail on any variety of issues that we've identified tonight or are apparent from a review of the EAF. And that's going to involve further study of further review of additional studies to be submitted by the applicant. At some point, you're going to be at a point where where it's necessary to make a seeker declaration, and the board's been through this before. If you identify one or more potential adverse impacts, you should consider making a positive declaration, which then requires the applicant to go through an environmental impact statement process. It's a similar process to what's being done for Hudson Highlands Reserve. Alternatively, if through additional studies and information provided by the applicant, you actually believe they've offered appropriate mitigation for any potential concerns you see, you might be warranted to issue a negative seeker declaration, at which time you could actually move forward with review of the subdivision and site plan and move those actions at some point down the road.
I'm going to ask you one more question, but our legal eagle was doing on the one hand, on the other hand with his head. So I wonder if he's got something to say.
Asking me or asking Ron?
Well, Ron is a brilliant man, but he's not our legal eagle. That's you. So
Very good.
I'm asking if you have anything to say.
All right. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'll keep it brief. First off, just as far as an overview of how this project is going to be processed. This project requires an amendment to the Garrison Golf Course Planned Development District zone. That's a zoning change, which the town board will be enacting. It's not a variance. It's a local law that will be enacted, amending the town code to allow this development or the uses proposed in this development to go forward. Now, before the town board can get to that point, and there'll be referral of that local law to the planning board when it's actually drafted, SECR has to be completed. This board, when the 30 days expires, will be the lead agency in a coordinated SECR review. You will be making the SECR determination on this. Other boards have the ability to comment and raise issues, but at the end of the day, this is the board, planning board, which will be making the SECR determination. In making the SECR determination, you're going to move along this application to some extent. You already have, some drafts before you as far as, what's being proposed and where things are going to go and the like. And in the course of asking questions and getting answers, I think you're going to work with the applicant and refine the plan, if you will, get a better idea of what's being proposed and what you're okay with and what you have issues with. And so to some extent that'll move along the site plan, and I suppose I doubt the subdivision will change, but I guess it's possible. And as you ask questions and get answers, you're going to be eventually, as Ron pointed out, in a position to make a SECR determination as to whether any potential significant adverse environmental impacts. And chief tool that you're going to have in that is the part 2 of the SECR EAF. Now, the applicant provided you with a proposed filled out version of it, and they checked, no or small impact or moderate to large impact and the like. At the end of the day, part 2 is the planning board's document. It's something you should go through line by line, or have Ron, go through it at least and advise you, what findings should be made. You can either take his word for it, or at a meeting, sit down and literally go through, make a determination if they're going to be no or small or impacts, or if they're going to be moderate or large impacts. And if you identify a number of moderate to large impacts that the applicant can't explain to you to your satisfaction as to why they actually aren't going to have significant potential significant adverse impacts, then you're going to be in a position where you have to issue a positive declaration. If, however, they either are no potential large impacts that you identify when you go through the part 2, or if you determine the ones that were identified really because of conditions or improvements that the applicant is going to make in the course of making this development. Perhaps we talked about, and I don't know if it's reasonable or not, or if it's even practical, but Neil talked about possibly realigning the road, for example, something along those lines. You could say, well, yeah, but there's not going to be any actually. It's been modified. It's been mitigated already to the maximum extent practicable. We don't need a positive declaration. We don't have to go through the EIS process. That's going to work itself out one way or another, but you're going to wind up making that determination based on the EAF. Once you make that determination, it's going to be time for the town board to draft the local law, hold a public hearing on it, and hopefully adopt the local law to allow planning board to grant site plan and the special site plan, at least. I suppose the special use permit too. The subdivision, that has nothing to do with the uses. But to grant the land use approvals that this applicant needs to move forward. And when they do that, like I said, the local law will be drafted, probably with input from this board to begin with, but certainly when there's a draft document, hey, this is the local law we're going to act, it will come to you, the planning board, to review and say, gee, approving a hotel with that many rooms just doesn't seem like a good idea to us. It should be a smaller hotel. It's a use that doesn't have to be allowed on this property. The town board can craft it as large or as small as it wants. I'm not suggesting that the hotel shouldn't be approved or anything. I'm just using that as an example. You understand, I'm not trying to prejudge the application here. So anyway, the local law will be adopted, and then the applicant comes back to you or continues before you. And if it's appropriate, getting completed SECR and the local law being adopted, you'll move on to site plan, subdivision, and special use permit.
Thank you for that. Ron, did you have anything else you wanted to add? You're on mute, Ron.
Yeah, I'm getting there. No, I have nothing further.
Okay. So if I were one of the 50 some odd members of the public, not of the applicant, listening tonight, I would of course want to know, when do I get to speak in front of a microphone or in front of my computer, if we're still doing this by then? when are the opportunities for actual verbal engagement? And let me put a pause there for a second, Ron, before you answer, which is, as a board, for those of you, I think Kim, Neil, Dennis were on the board at the time. We spent an enormous amount of time on Hudson Highlands Reserve in a very lengthy EIS process. We went through that part 2 line by line. Everyone on the board brought their notes of how they thought it should be for each one, because it's our document. The applicant writes it, but it's our document. We then edited it and gave direction to Ron and the applicant. We went back and forth, but ultimately it's our decision about each of those findings. And that will be our tool. There's also for determining positive or negative. And there are 2 documents, I have them on my PC from the state, that define how the process flows. I think we need to send those around. And maybe Ron or Steve, if you have more recent versions of secret definitions, because that is not an easy process. It will require a fair amount. And clearly Kim and Laura have started with a deep pen and paper editing job, but we're gonna have to do that as a coordinated effort. So back to you, Ron. Can you answer the question, when will the public, these members, we have to speak publicly on this topic in front of this board? You're on mute, sir.
Every action that's before you and also that before the town board does require a public hearing prior to any action. The issue of when the public hearing is held might be driven to some extent whether you have a positive declaration or not. That likewise would mandate a hearing that you then combine with other requirements. So the timing of the public hearing will depend on how you process your seeker responsibilities.
So the commentary of the public happens after a determination, not before.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm doing this a little Socratically so the members of the public can actually hear this as well. Steve, go ahead.
Well, having said that, and Ron is absolutely right as far as the formal public hearing goes. On a large application like this, members of the public should be given some informal opportunity to give some input before you actually make your pos deck or your neg deck. It's been the policy of this board to hold a public hearing first and then make its secret determination. This, if it looks like you may wind up with a positive declaration, may be an exception to that. And you may want to have, if we're going to go that route, and I'm not saying that you should by any stretch of the imagination, I'm just saying procedurally, if it looks like you're going to wind up with a positive declaration, you know, you're going to want to have, you know, some input before you go. You're going to want to make that before you hold the official public hearing, because you're going to need a public hearing on the EIS anyway. And you could either make that with that as a public hearing on the site plan and subdivision and everything else, or you could wind up actually holding 2, oddly enough. But it would be better if you could just hold the 1. But normally we have the secret determination after the public hearing. If you're going to go pos deck, you're going to want to do it the other way around. Either way, you're going to want to allow some forum for people to comment before you make that secret determination.
I'll turn it over to the board in a second. Do you have any advice for us sooner than later? Maybe next month is too soon, but maybe after that. Any advice about when we should hold that public commentary / not a formal hearing?
Well, it wouldn't be a hearing. You might just allow some people to speak informally at the meeting. That's not the same thing as a public hearing.
Once we let people start talking, I'm pretty sure there are 63 people on this thing.
Well,
there are not 2 people who want to talk.
My advice, Neil, is that in the course of, I would say, the next 2 or 3 meetings, you're going to have a pretty good idea as to whether you're going to be issuing a positive declaration or not on this. You've given the applicant quite a few comments now. You're going to want to see what they come back with in terms of their answers, kind of digest that and get a feel for it. And, you know, maybe even do a preliminary run at the EAF part 2 just to see how things look.
And we did that with Hudson Highlands. We had a good working session on that.
Because you'd like to avoid having a positive declaration if you possibly can. I'm sure the applicant would like to do that too. I mean, if it's justified, you have to do it, you do it. You don't shy away from it. But they can put together an EAF part 3 where they answer a lot of questions in writing and with studies and tests and things. And sometimes that's enough to satisfy the board that a positive declaration isn't necessary. But, you know, like I say, see how the next couple meetings go. You'll get a feel for it. And, you know, if it looks like a negative declaration is something that's feasible, you would probably want to hold the public hearing before you make your secret determination.
So board members, any questions of Ron or Steve on the process? No? Okay. So what I'm gonna do is, it's 8:48. I'm gonna open it up to the applicant and there are the many representatives to have the floor for the next 45 minutes to comment if they'd like in any direction. Clearly, we're gonna need further study, writing, comment, answers and commentary and writing, but it certainly makes perfect sense to have you have a chance to speak. So maybe Kelly, you can let the applicant and their representatives in so they can provide any commentary they'd like.
Okay. I just let Kate Lieberman in.
Well, if you can, Kelly, you're fine to let Glenn, Kate, and Davis, and I'm sure there's another.
Kelly, can you let in Dan Hollis, our attorney, as well, and Lainey McKinnon, our landscape architect?
Yes.
We could also probably let in John Canning and Jan Johansson.
They're all coming in little by little.
Okay, great. Neil, should I speak for a minute while everyone comes in?
Well, I mean, if you would like to, yes. I mean, we don't need to fill the space, I guess. You know, unless you got a joke to tell. But I mean, you guys should decide how you want to use the time, because obviously we've given you a lot of thoughts. I'm sure none of them were surprises. And so you can decide how you want to use the time to share some thoughts back with this board. But clearly, there's a lot of I don't know if the work needs to be done. Maybe you've already done it, but certainly a lot of communication needs to occur so this board can get the answers to those questions.
Of course. Well, I'll say while we wait for people to come in, I just want to, introduce myself. I'm Katie Lieberman, the managing director of the Shakespeare Festival. I lead the theater in partnership with Davis McCallum, our artistic director. And I just want to thank all of you on this board who joined us on a freezing walk on Saturday, as Neil mentioned, and the many members of our community who also bundled up. It was really heartening just to see how many people are so invested in the future of the site in HBSF and in our communities. So I'm really grateful for that and grateful to all of you for your very thoughtful questions tonight. We'll be careful to, as Neil said, to take some time to digest them and get back to you with our responses. I also just have to say thanks to the extraordinary generosity of Chris Davis, who's here, Garrison resident. Because of him, the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, who's been a longtime tenant in Philipstown, will finally have our permanent home here. I guess I'll speak for one more minute just to say, after our 35 years in Philipstown, we're just so eager to be able to put down roots in this community in a way that we never thought was possible. As everyone has heard tonight, our plan does include a proposal to build a permanent open-air theater tent, accessible pathways, parking, parkland with wildflower gardens, native meadows and picnic lawns. And as you've encouraged us, we've been working hard to envision the long term, which includes, as we've talked about, that second indoor theater space, a community pavilion, and the lodging within the parameters of the amendment to the approved hotel use. All of that's going to be considered in the future. On the call tonight, we've got Chip Allman, the general manager of the Garrison, and our expert consultants, including our landscape architects, traffic engineers, environmental consultants, and acoustical consultants. I'm going to hand it over to Dan Hollis, our attorney, who's going to take it from here. Is Dan on here yet?
Is he under a different name? Because
P. Daniel Hollis. It might.
Oh, it might be under P. Yes. Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, I'm turning it over to you.
Unmute.
Here I am. And, you know, I look at my office building, that's me. I'm sorry for the delay while I got hooked up. My name is Daniel Hollis from the law firm of Hollis, Laidlaw and Simon. We're fortunate to be the project attorneys. And I just wanted to respond, and Mr. Chairman Zuckerman will appreciate the fact that I like to do things by the numbers. And we received an awful lot of information in the last 5 or 6 hours. Mr. Gaynor's very comprehensive outline and the comments, the very thoughtful comments of the board tonight. And I don't want to respond in scattershot fashion because we might miss something or it would be out of order, and order matters. You know, the order of how we put a record together so that you can make a reasoned determination at the end. One of the things I do want to do, though, is allay some of the thoughts and concerns with regard to what's been referred to most sort of generally as the artist housing. Those are lodging facilities, as the same are defined in your zoning ordinance, and they are going to be part of the hotel operation, so that the artist, when they're engaged by the Shakespeare Festival, will reside there as in the cottages. They're not going to be long-term leases, and that we are more than willing to accept a limitation on length of stay for anyone else other than an artist. The artist will only be there for the period of their engagement. Any other limitation on length of stay, 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, will allay the concern that this is going to be some sort of a summer lake cottage operation. That's not the intention. That's not what it's going to be. I agree with Mr. Gaba and Mr. Gaynor that the EAF Part 2 is a very important document. It's your document. And I would respectfully submit that at our next meeting, that we take the opportunity to go through that document and use that as the outline, so we can coalesce all the comments, both in the outline and in the comments made tonight, and respond in orderly fashion. And at the end of that process, if there are further studies needed to allay any concern that there are moderate or large impacts that we can't either mitigate or avoid, and further studies are necessary, then we'll provide those further studies so as to avoid, in our hope, a positive declaration. I think that using the Part 2 as the outline for our future discussions would bring form to all of the facts that we have assembled. Mr. Gaynor has a very good outline by category, and we'll respond taking the comments made tonight, including them in those categories, and following the outline in the Part 2, if that's acceptable to the board and its consultants. If there are any particular questions to any of our professionals that we have with us tonight that you would like to pose directly to them, members of the board, we're glad to try to answer them. But I don't think we want to start to pick from our notes and from Mr. Gaynor's list what we really want to answer, because I'd rather do it in an orderly, sequential fashion, so both the public and the board has before it an orderly response and a comprehensive response to each and every point raised.
That would be my preference, Mr. Hollis, as well. And Ron, would you agree with that?
No, absolutely. That makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think any set of responses in the next 40 minutes or so will be incomplete and may not be satisfying, unless, again, I'll let my fellow board members ask if they would like specific questions about this. Sorry, Steve, any reactions to what Mr. Hollis was saying?
I agree with his approach in terms of providing answers to the questions that you pose. Look, you might be in a position to go over the EAF Part 2 at your next meeting. It might be a little early for that. You might need to digest what information they have and see if you have further questions before we get to there. Certainly, it's something to consider, but I don't know that I'm
Let's do this, Mr. Hollis. I think you clearly got a lot of questions from us in written form, and I think some of them have been augmented by verbal or oral comments made tonight. It probably wouldn't be a bad thing for us to put a chunk of time in the next meeting in February for you to respond to those questions. And I think from there, then we can use the EIS as the tool. But I think it may be valuable in describing some of those pieces that may be a good use for you, good use for us, given that Ron has gone to that extent. How does that feel?
But it feels pretty good. And I think the fact that the questions and the outline are in an orderly fashion, I believe that we'll do our best to reply in that fashion in writing before your next meeting, so that there can be a discussion based on question, answer, reaction, so that we can move the process along. I understand from the site walk, I wasn't there, but I understand that there was talk of a further site walk. Is that something we'd like to do tonight, to schedule that? And would you like a refresher course on the site plan? Ms. McKinnon, our landscape architect, is standing by and can run you through that site plan, just so you have it in your in front of you as you take the questions you've asked, see the plan as she explains it briefly in the time you've allotted to us, if that's helpful.
So before we go on to your question about your colleague, let's just go back to, you asked two other questions. I just want to see if any of my colleagues have any opinions on the process whereby the applicant will provide written remarks to our questions at our next meeting. Any questions about that process? Any challenge with that? Okay. So then secondly, as far as a site visit, we did describe the portions we didn't capture were the western portion where the new golf entrance will be, nor the northern portion. We did not actually get to the, sorry, the train is going by. We did not get to the garrison itself, the building, the restaurant, or any of the things that are happening around it. So there probably would be some value, as we discussed, having another visit. So board members' thoughts on that? Anybody opposed to that idea? Okay, I would like to schedule that then. I think it's a good action. We can take that after the applicant's done, because I want to run through you guys, then we can take a formal vote and commentary on that. As far as anyone have any questions of Ms. McKinnon, okay, very good, very good. I'm not sure why Mr. Plummer couldn't hear it. I could barely hear myself when the train goes by. So does anyone have any questions of Ms. McKinnon? I'm not sure a extemporaneous presentation about the process, the project again is necessary, but other folks want that. Kim, go ahead.
It might be useful, since we've just been talking about it, to have a visual to, store in our brains. I would not mind seeing a presentation.
That's perfectly fine. Then anyone else, everyone else okay with that?
Yes.
Good. All right, Ms. McKinnon, you have the floor then.
Okay, yes, sir. Let me share my screen and we'll look at the plan, and we have two renderings we can share just as a little bit of a refresher for what our vision will be. Let's see. Okay. So I'll start here with the site plan. And I will orient us in how we walked on Sunday, just so I think that will be the easiest way to keep everybody on the same page here. If you'll remember, we met here at the parking lot and we came down through this existing road through the alley of trees. And we started here and we made it, and I'll go back a little bit more with detail, but I just want to give you the path that we took. So I think that's going to be helpful. We wound our way around. We looked at the artist housing. We came this way over to the future potential parking lot. We went out to Snake Hill and we came up to the top of the ridge. So that's a brief overview here, but what I wanted to do is take you through what we envision the experience to be like a little bit, because I think in such a large group, it's hard to communicate all of that as we move through. So let's start at the Snake Hill at the south, at the bottom of the page here. So we envision when you come in from Snake Hill Road, you'd have a very clear path as you move into the site here on our over the wetland and into the parking area that will serve primarily for the theater. If you were a theater visitor, you'd be able to come in, park, you'd come up through a welcome center, which would have a box office, a place for you to be able to pick up a picnic if you were arriving early to have a picnic on the lawns. And this is also where we have the native plant garden that we were talking about briefly on site. After you'd come through there, you would walk up It'd be like a choose your own adventure of path network up to the top of the ridge, with an accessible path being your primary path here, wide, paved, to bring you up to the top of the ridge, with 3 lawns that overlook towards the Hudson River and to the Wingate, as you could have a picnic before the show, listen to actors speak, and have a small gathering. Then you come to the tent here. In the future, that's our, this is the permanent tent that we've been discussing. To the left of the tent is a back of house building for the actors to prepare, have the get into their costumes before the show. They would have their, very similar to Bosco, have a procession along the ridge and actually reveal themselves during the beginning of the show here, right where the number 4 is almost, and be able to make that procession into the theater. To the right-hand side of the tent is a restroom and concession stand. This is a future building here. This is the primary area where we would be during a theater performance in the summer. You'll notice behind the theater, there's a road that comes out here. This is a service road to be able to, if a light needs to be fixed, a truck can get up there and drop something off. But it is not intended as a primary way to access the tent. After the events at the tent, you'd be able to, again, choose your own adventure down to a variety of wherever you may have parked, with very low landscape lighting that's pointed at the ground, just enough to light your path so you're not fumbling along the planted areas or along the path. Number 13 here is the indoor theater that we looked at on site and we have spoken about a bit tonight. You'll notice the parking lot that's existing remains exactly where it is. Number 14 is what potentially it's where the golf pro shop is currently. This may stay and or it may become a pavilion in the long term, an open air pavilion where you could have a class to learn more about the area, or a theater group, open air, beautiful. 17, 18, 19, everyone's probably fairly familiar with our wedding facilities, the Valley Inn and the existing hotel rooms. Number 15 here, we've spoken about that a bit. This is our accommodations. It would be a block of approximately 20 rooms. Number 16 is another parking area that would be built in coordination with being able to serve these rooms, to expand upon that when the time arrives. You can see that the existing service drive here remains as it is, with the extension of it up through this area, which we are continuing to study, but we're looking to pull apart the service area and the circulation that's associated with the delivery for the restaurant or for a wedding party, away from our primary circulation for guests to the site. Number 15 is the artist housing that we've been discussing. And then the primary area here that we have created by rerouting the road that currently comes in off of Route 9, we're leaving the existing entrance right where it is. We're simply changing where that road goes once you are inside the property. By pulling it to the north here and swinging out, we've really created a much more contiguous open space inside of the property that allows for a walking paths or passive recreation, maybe a picnic on a Saturday with your family. And then I'll highlight way down here at the bottom, this number 21 is our future residence that we've been discussing. Is that a helpful overview? Let's see. I guess wait, I got a couple more. I don't want to forget.
The golf.
Yes.
Support facilities.
So we've spoken a bit about them. We'll see them on a next site visit. This is an existing area of golf maintenance, and actually where the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Theater is stores their tent in the maintenance area. This would be redone to become the new golf pro shop and cart barn storage, using already existing entrances into that area, and the maintenance area for the golf area would stay exactly where it is. And Chip will have to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this becomes hole number 1, but your holes all stay on this western side of the property. So from there, we've created this rendering. This is looking from, we're as if we're birds hovering above. We're looking down from the southern entrance. You can see the parking area, the new proposed parking area for the theater off to just off the right of the image. The box office, picnic pickup, your path up to the top of the hill through a native meadow that, you know, is beautiful, blooms in the summer, will have a nice textural quality to it, up to your lawns here in the middle and the tent structure. And you can see here the concessions. So that's our vision for this area. And then this is another view, a little bit more of a eye level view back towards the tent, as if you were on the lawns enjoying a picnic with your friends and able to look back before the show. So hopefully that's a helpful way to look at some of that. I can stop there. I think that gives you an overview of where we went and what our vision is.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Ms. McKinnon. At least at least it's not terribly different than what we had seen before. Questions though? Any board members have any questions of Ms. McKinnon?
Mr. Lewis does.
Peter, go ahead.
I just have a clarification. I've seen in a number of different places, we're talking about a 40-room hotel, and I've also heard a 20-room hotel. So which one is it?
So I think maybe the 40-room hotel comes from the previous PDD approval, where we're looking to propose a 20-room structure, and then with that, the artist housing.
Okay, thank you.
Or I should say guest accommodations. That's my fault. I used the wrong term there.
Other questions about the plan? Okay, I don't see any. So, Mr. Hollis, if there are any other questions or sorry, not questions, but comments from your colleagues?
No, I think we would rather do it in a more orderly fashion and be responsive to each of the categories that were brought up tonight and in the outline, and do it in comprehensive fashion.
Good, thank you. So board members, I think we have the belief that we should do a site plan visit part 2 to visit the western portion and the northwest portion, basically the buildings that exist, to see any other of the structures, maybe see where the new additional hotel is going to go, where the new golf course would be, but basically cover that northern western corner that we did not cover. So I guess we'll have a motion for a site visit, then we'll get a date. So can I have a motion for that, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Peter. Second. Kim, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Okay, Kelly, can we work on a date, please? I guess, please go ahead.
February 7th, you have a site visit already at 9:30 for the con at 242 Route 9, 403. So do you want to do it on the same day?
I fear that this is not a quick visit to the backyard and look at the septic tank, especially given the attendance we had on Sunday, which was well attended, to say it mildly. So I think we're going to have to look at, will people be unenthused by Valentine's Day? Are people doing something special on Sunday morning? Or we feel like that is safe love territory?
You just went there, didn't you?
9:30, is anyone opposed to Valentine's Day? I mean, usually Valentine's Day, the evenings are more special than the mornings, so thoughts?
That's fine with us.
All right, guys, anyone opposed to it?
No.
Right, so let's do Valentine's Day, which will allow us to have the site visit before our next, our meeting on the 18th. I think we're on the 18th next month. So 14th, 9:30, and for all those who are not, for the 46 members of the public who have hung around, pencil us in if you'd like to join us, 9:30 on the 14th. And apologies to any spouses, significant others, etc., for taking your loved one away for a chunk of time on that morning. Okay, any other business this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hollis. Thank you to all the applicants and the representatives. can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Peter. Second.
I'll second.
All right, Neil, thank you very much. All in favor? Aye. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining this special meeting. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.